This is the daily writing exercise recorded, day 54, Scala, Gaspe. No one knew what it was supposed to be or what purpose it might serve. What was known was that it would cost a lot of money. Money well spent, Henry said. But what does it do? John asked. Henry waved the question off by closing his eyes and shaking his head. But I can't just give you my money, John objected. I need to know what it's for. Henry shrugged. Why do you care? It's an investment opportunity. Nothing more, nothing less. John shook his head and sighed. I'm not going to engage in something, he said, getting up from his chair. He lost his train of thought and threw his hands in the air. Not, he said firmly. This is silly. What was it called again? Scala, Gaspe, Henry pronounced slowly. John sighed deeply. He looked down upon Henry's face, which was directed to the cup of coffee on the table between them. John had not taken any, much to the ire of the barista that now seemed to have disappeared. Are you even going to look at me? He asked impatiently. Henry wet his lips and cast his eyes to the floor. Sit down, he said, pointing to the chair John stood in front of. Sit down and let's talk about it. Talk about what? John exclaimed. You're asking me to completely uproot my life, and then you won't even tell me what for? Even worse, you're telling me it's going to cost me a lot of money. Like, who in their right mind would ever be so dumb to participate in this sort of thing? Henry wet his lips and looked up at John. I did, he said calmly. John frowned and sighed. Okay, he said. All right. He rubbed his hand along his face and looked around him. The cafe was empty. He and Henry were the only living things in a room that could easily hold 50. The barista had disappeared. John wondered where he had gone to, and why, upon this raining morning, he had ever agreed to meet Henry for something so ridiculous. He scratched the few strands of hair upon his chin he had missed during shaving, as he stared out the large cafe window at the rain pouring upon the parked cars outside. He lowered his head and briefly glanced up at the ceiling. Why? He asked sullenly. Henry looked up at him and smiled. Look, he said, leaning forwards. Will you sit down? He added kindly. John shook his head and reluctantly sat down. Look, Henry said, once John sat down. It's all part of the game. What game? John asked. It's the way things work, Henry explained. John sighed and threw himself back into his chair. Look, it works like this, Henry said. You invest a bit now, which, yes, you will lose, but that's irrelevant. John veered back up in his chair and leaned forwards. I don't have that kind of money, he almost shouted. Embarrassed, he looked around to see if anyone had heard him. After he confirmed that they were still alone, John continued in a hushed tone. I don't understand what you're trying to do here, he said. Let me explain, Henry said in equal hushed tone. All right, John said. You invest a bit now, Henry said, and yes, you will lose it, but that's the whole point. Is to show us, is to show them that you have confidence in the project. And then? John asked. Then, Henry said, exhaling a great deal of air, then you'll get a call and you'll be invited to a meeting. John rubbed his face with both hands. This is so stupid, he said. You are literally asking me to donate millions of euros to a random project just so I can be part of it? Honestly, it sounds a lot like a pyramid or a multi-level marketing scheme to me. Well, it isn't, Henry assured. These people have too much money to operate a scheme like that. John chuckled. I mean, isn't it actually always the rich that operate schemes like that, though? Henry sighed. Well, either way, this one isn't. All right, John said. So, I give them my money. You're not giving it to them, Henry corrected him. You're investing. You're getting it back at some point. Right, John chuckled. Investing, sure, right, investing. So, I'm investing my money into this random project, which you won't tell me what it does, and then what? And then you'll be invited, Henry said. But to what, though? John asked. I can't tell you that, Henry said. Why not? John asked. Because it's not my place. Then what is your place? John asked. Henry sighed again. He scratched the side of his head and ran his hands through his hair. Look, all I'm here to do is to give the introduction. What happens after this is entirely up to you. Alright? John shook his head and looked out the window. Okay, well, no matter what happens, he said, this is really fucking stupid. Nothing more has been written or recorded. Thank you for listening, and good night.